about to play is going to help you with several things. It's going to help you alternate pick tighter. It's going to help you play maybe in a little bit different key. We are in standard tuning, but we're actually playing based on the key of D minor. You'll also be using a variation of power chords, meaning the power chords won't be typical. You're going to be moving that second note of the power chord around quite a bit. So I'm excited for you to dig in and learn this. Let's get to it. Real quick, if you're part of my Guitar Academy, you have the tabs and the multiple backing tracks for this lesson. So make sure you log in and download those. Of course, I'm going to break this down and I'll throw the tabs up along the way when we get to the parts where we'll play them together, okay? But first of all, let me play the first half of this riff. It's kind of split up into two sections here. So this is the first half and I'll slow it down a bit. Okay, so again, we're starting with the D power chord, A string and D string, A and D strings, frets 5 and 7. And how we know that's the D minor, well actually I'll save that for after the lesson. We're basing this on the D power chord here. And as you can tell, the two things we're doing constantly is the alternate picking, number one, and I'm only alternate picking, this is important, I'm only alternate picking the one note. However, when we go to play the power chords and the variation of the power chords, that's when we're playing both strings together, okay? So here's our little path that we're taking here. So we start the power chord out, not the typical power chord. Normally, again, you'd be playing the A and D strings, frets 5 and 7, that's your power chord, but we actually start with 5 and 8. And then we go 5 and 7. And then we actually go 5 and 5. And then we hop back to 5 and 7. So again, let me go through this very slow. You can see the pathway we have here. So 5, 8, 5, 7, 5, 5. We go back and forth on that a little bit, all while alternate picking that A string, 5th fret. Now, before we transition to the next, and we'll throw the tabs up in a second here. We'll play this through once we learn these parts. So let me just explain this first. What I do before I transition to this, that's where I hit the two open notes, the two open strings, A and D strings. So listen to this transition. I'm doing that because it kind of serves as, again, just a small transition, just a natural sounding transition that goes from that D chord to the next power chord that we're going to play, which is going to be a D sharp, or if you want to call that E flat, okay? So here we go. So we go right into those next two power chords, which again, that's going to be the D sharp followed by an F power chord, but we're playing a variation, a slight variation. There's one note within those power chords that we're going to change before we play the actual power chord. So what I'm doing is, let's get our finger position here. A and D strings, frets 6 and 8, that's for our D sharp power chord, but I'm starting that by playing 6 and 7, then 6 and 8, okay? So that's what gives us that really cool movement, that really cool melody along with the rhythm, along with the power chord, right? The alternate picking, everything. We've got that second note kind of as our underlying melody, if you want to look at it that way or hear it that way. Then we're moving up to the F power chord, but we're going to play this differently the first time around. So normally F power chord, we would play frets 8 and 10. But we're not doing that. We're going to start out, it's going to feel a little backwards here. We're always going to hit that root note first, right? That F note on here, but we're going to play 8 and 7, and then 8 and 8. And it sounds like this. Now, real quick, I should have prefaced this earlier. This is more of an intermediate and beyond style lesson here, riff lesson here. If you're just starting out, what I would recommend you doing, especially if you're part of my Guitar Academy, is go through Metal Guitar Apprentice. That's my fast track to go from beginner to intermediate, and you're going to build a strong foundation there. If you're not part of my academy, I've got some other beginner YouTube videos on here as well, so check those out if you're having trouble with this at this point. Now, let's play through this. So we explained the riff. Let's play through this. I'll throw the tabs up. We'll kind of slow it down at first, and then I'll speed it up a little at the end. Part two of this riff, actually it's the exact same thing, except we end that last chord a little bit differently. And actually not a lot differently. There's really only one change to this. So how we ended just now, we're going to do this instead. So you see, we revert to kind of the regular power chord here, the F power chord, but we start out by barring the 8th fret across the A and D string, so 8-8 followed by 8-10, and I do a little back and forth there and just kind of let that ring out. So let me play that part, that second half in context, and what we'll do is we'll put the entire riff together and we'll play through that, but here is just that second half in context. So again, everything stays the same. Everything is exactly the same. We just do a little bit of a different ending. So let's do this. Since we played through the whole thing just now, let's put the entire riff together. Let's play both parts together. I'll throw the tabs up and let's jam. Now I said I'd give you a few little tips on the theory part of this. We're in the key of D minor, and there's one chord that we borrow from another key here. We'll talk about that briefly. I'll explain that. But real quick, if you don't have Metal Riffs and Licks, the Ultimate Metal Guitar Practice Guide, grab your copy of that. I have a link in the description. Now, if you already have that, but you're not part of my Guitar Academy, then consider joining that. There's a link where you can learn more about that. This isn't just another course that you're going to take. Actually, there are multiple courses you'll get access to, but there are also ongoing lessons, many tips and tutorials, everything you need to not just learn a new technique or a new riff or lick, but to continue growing as a guitar player and as a musician. So links below in the description. So the theory behind this, again, we're in the key of D minor here. Now, why do I say D minor and not just the key of D? Because we are playing power chords, and we know power chords, well, they don't really have keys, but they kind of do though, right? Because the power chords that you play in conjunction with the one that you are basing the riff on, well, that can kind of determine the key that you're playing in. Oftentimes though with metal, and especially as you get into the darker side of things like the black metal and some of the death metal, the chords are so all over the place, My buddy, my good friend Brad Mader of the band Must Not Kill, we talk about this quite often. He's just playing chords and notes all over the place, so it'd be very difficult to determine what key that their songs are in, and that's a good thing. So I only mention that part, and we'll get into this real quick, but I only mention that to say this: don't overthink this stuff. Don't allow learning a bit of theory to box you into a set of rules that say, well, I've got to match my guitar playing to the theory. No, you do not. Please don't do that. What you're doing is you're going to learn enough of this theory stuff that we're about to go over. You're going to learn enough of that so that it serves you, not you serve it. So just change your way of thinking. If you've always thought, well, I've got to learn theory and I've got to play what the theory says to play, it's got to be these notes and then this key or whatever, just trash that thought. We're turning this around so that theory serves you. So anyway, we're in the key of D minor, and one way I know that, well, it's kind of safe to say a lot of our metal stuff's kind of based on minors because that's just what it is, right? But one way of knowing that is, you notice I start with this chord here. So that right there, frets 5 and 8. That's part of the D minor scale. So all of those notes that we're playing with that D power chord, because we're playing that second note, well, that helps us determine, okay, we're in the key of D minor when we're playing that, because that's a B flat, which is part of the D minor scale. So pretty easy to figure that part out. Now, what I want to explain next is we're going to kind of do what some will call like a chromatic movement. We're going to play a chord. We're moving up to a chord, and this is very common in metal music, and that's why I'm explaining this. We're moving up to a chord that's not in the key of D minor. Okay, now the chord we move to after that, that's in the key of D minor, but this one right here is not, and that's that D sharp, or if you want to call it E flat. So going from here, that's not technically part of D minor. But again, we call this a chromatic movement because we're just going to borrow that chord, okay? And then we're going to move to the F power chord, which that's actually in the key of D minor. So nope. Yes. Okay, so we're in the key of D minor, except for that one chord that we play. We're kind of borrowing that chord. And now that technically, I don't want to go off the deep end here. This part here, well, that could easily be in the key of G minor. So now you see how these things can kind of tie together, and I don't want that to confuse you. In other words, I don't want you to think, well, what key is it in now? We went to another chord that's not in that key anymore. Just think of it as kind of a really cool and almost like wicked sounding addition to what we're playing here. Again, I never want you to think that, well, my song is in the key of D minor, so I can only play the chords in D minor. I've got to stick to what the theory says. No, please don't think that way. I want you to think beyond that and say, okay, well, I know the notes in the key of D minor. This is how I want you to look at this. I know the notes in the key of D minor, and I go through this in Metal Riffs and Licks, by the way, in the free guide. I know the notes in D minor, right? And I know the chord progression. I know the chords that fit with D minor. That serves as your foundation, as what I call your safe zone, your foundation of knowledge and safe zone, that you know that if you're playing something in the key of D minor, you know the D minor scale, the D minor notes, where they are across the fretboard because you practice those, right? And you're not playing scales. No, we're definitely not playing scales. No. That's not our solo. You do not want your solo to sound like you're practicing scales. You don't want your riffs to sound like you're practicing scales. That would be very boring. But we have the knowledge to serve you. This knowledge that you have serves you because it gives you a safe pocket to play in. It's like, okay, I know I can play these notes and it's going to perfectly fit. What this does is it gives you the freedom to step outside of that and then try some new things like this. Okay, so I hope this little kind of like a mini theory session. I hope that it helps. Again, I explain all that, how the chord progressions work together, and of course, how the scales can all run together. And again, it's not about learning scales. You know, it's not even really about learning the chords. It's about having this foundational knowledge to give you the freedom to know where to play, the pockets you can play in that's going to perfectly fit that key, but also give you the freedom to step outside of that, knowing you can always kind of come back to this and land on your feet. So let me know if that makes sense, and leave any comments you have on this in the comments section. When I talk about theory, when I teach this sort of thing, it's not something I really dove deeply into, and I'm way off track on this lesson here, by the way, but I hope these little tidbits help. I always like to have the guitar chat at the end, so consider this our guitar chat. Again, I desire for you that you don't try to fit your playing into theory, that you're not overthinking this stuff. Instead, you're just gaining some tidbits of knowledge here and there about theory, that you make it serve you. That's what you're doing, and that's how your own riffs are going to shine, because you're not going to box yourself into anything. You're going to use this knowledge to give you that freedom to expand. So sometimes it's just a mindset shift that we have to make when it comes to things like this. Now, if you're a theory buff, you know, I probably lost you already, because you're like, well, Jason, you're explaining it wrong, and that's, you know, theory, everybody should learn theory. And I get that, but what I also get, and what I want everyone to get, is that not everyone learns the same. And I didn't grow up in playing guitar deep in theory knowledge. I just inadvertently learned a lot over the years, because I've been playing live music since the early 90s. I started playing guitar in '89, and I've played multiple styles. I've played everything from darker stuff, from metal, to being in rock bands, to even playing in churches and stuff like that. So I have a very broad spectrum of, you know, progressions and styles and that sort of thing. So I'm not boasting, I'm just saying that to say this. I've inadvertently learned a lot of theory I didn't even realize along the way. So now that I've kind of figured out some easy ways to break it down, I want to share these things with you. So if you want more on this type of stuff here, I'm happy to put it out on YouTube here. Real quick, I'm also working on a very simplified theory course in my Guitar Academy. So if you're part of my Guitar Academy, that's going to be coming up in the upcoming months here. So in any case, guys, leave me comments if you have any questions on this stuff. I'd love to know your thoughts as well. Don't forget to check out the links in the description, and I will see you on the next video. As always, keep it metal and keep playing music.